Today is the feast day of St. Francis de Sales. He was the Bishop of Geneva and is considered a doctor of the Church. Francis is the patron saint of writers and journalists, which segues right into our next story. On this feast day, Pope Francis calls fake news evil and encourages journalists to make it their mission to search for the truth. In his annual message on social communications, the Holy Father calls for a commitment to rediscovering the dignity of journalism. He also highlights the personal responsibility of journalists. Fake news is a favorite topic of President Trump, but the message made no reference to him or any other public figures. Juliet Linley is EWTN News Nightly's Vatican correspondent. She joins us from Rome. The Pope is coming off of a week of particularly bad press following his South America trip. In the past, he's criticized coverage of a letter sent to him by clergy and lay Catholics supporting what they say were, quote, heretical positions on marriage. So tell us today, how does he define fake news?
He defines it as journalists spreading falsehoods, putting out rhetorical slogans, or putting out sensational headlines. And so he says that using that to misinform people is wrong. And he's calling on journalists to rediscover the dignity of journalism and for reporters to speak the truth. Now, he says that doesn't mean sugarcoating the news or just covering feel-good stories. He says journalists needn't shy away from problems, from conflicts, from controversies, but he says they need to seek the truth when they do so. It's essentially the values that we are taught, Lauren, at journalism school, isn't it?
President Trump also uses the term fake news, but I don't think he says this. The Pope said that the first instance of fake news took place in the Garden of Eden. He connects it to original sin. What's the parallel?
Well, essentially, if you want, Eve ate the apple because the snake misinformed her, used mimicry as a strategy, used false and alluring arguments to lead Eve into temptation. So that's why the Pope is saying the first fake news, you can say that it goes back to the Garden of Eden.
And that crafty serpent. Pope Francis has been critical of journalists. Before he was Pope, he was known for very frosty relations with the media in Argentina, but that has changed since he's become Pope. He seems to like talking to journalists.
Well, he actually joked on the papal flight back from Peru just last Monday. He joked about how he hated giving interviews, and now he said how ironic that God has given me this job in which interactions with the press are inevitable, if not completely necessary. He certainly gives far more interviews now than he did as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He's learned to work with journalists. He's learned to use them, if you want, and work with them to put out the messages that he cares the most about. For instance, most recently, about integrating migrants or about protecting the planet.
Juliet Linley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.